Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Unblocked podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Smaro, and today we have with us Mary Haun. And Mary is a mother, wife, a modern-day mystic, and after having what she calls a spiritual slap in the face about 8 years ago, every aspect of her life has been transformed. She's gone from living her life as a victim of the world to living a persistent willingness to surrender everything. Through mind trading, meditation, and becoming a student of the classroom of life, Mary now lives a purposeful life overflowing with awareness, forgiveness, and miracles. This is a woman on a mission for awakening, and I'm excited to have her here today. Thanks for joining us, Mary.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. I'm so grateful and excited to be here. Truly, I feel like this is a blessing in the making.
Well, it for sure is for me. And we're just going to dive right in. So listeners, put on your safety belt, strap on your helmet. We're going deep today. And so I want to start with this spiritual slap in the face. Tell us what that's about.
Yeah, so I was living life on my own terms about 8 years ago. And I was, really kind of in the space of life just was coming at me and feeling like I had no sense of, I thought I was in control, but it became very, very clear that I could not control anything. And so I was actually in a really tough spot. I was living in Florida at the time, and I was in my second marriage, which was not a healthy situation at all. I had just realized or become aware of the fact that I was married to a con artist, which is a whole nother podcast that we could do. So that was interesting. But so here I had my kid in Florida, and I, married to this guy who's a con artist. And I was, just finding that I kept winding up in the same spot with, insert a new character. And I just had seen Wayne Dyer's movie called The Shift. I had read his book, and then I saw the movie on YouTube, and it just blew my mind and heart wide open. And so what happened when I saw that movie is I didn't really understand what had happened to the main character. She had some sort of shift, right? That's what the whole premise of the story is about, that she had a shift. And it didn't really say specifically what it was, but she had this moment of awakening. And I couldn't really understand or perceive it in any way other than to know someplace inside me was awakened, and I wanted what this character seemed to have. And I wanted to have this closeness to spirit, to have this inner connectivity plugged in. And I knew that I couldn't keep doing life the way that it had been going for me and the way that I thought that life should be or was. Some got lucky, some didn't. And some days I had good days and some days I didn't. And that's just the way it was. I didn't realize that I had a point of choice in all of it. And so I put this prayer up. And I basically said to God, I don't know what I'm doing here anymore. I don't know what this is all about. I'm asking you to lead the way because I can't do this anymore. I was literally on my knees, and I put this prayer up to the universe to help. I need help. And it was within a matter of weeks that my whole entire life just completely collapsed down there in Florida. That I found out that husband number 2 was a con artist, that all the things that I thought were one way were completely an illusion, that I was, I had myself and my daughter in this scary situation. And what ended up happening is I ended up leaving everything in Florida. I took my dog, my kid, and my mattress. I turned in my Jaguar and got myself a minivan and listened to Holy Spirit, which I didn't know was Holy Spirit at the time. And, actually ended up in Iowa. But before I left, one of the things that happened was I used to like to go into this used bookstore. It was really kind of a cool, eclectic place. And I got a really great vibe from that place. So I'd go in there every once in a while. Well, one day I wandered in there and, I'd always head back to the new agey section. Oh, maybe there's another book on angels or whatever, who knows what was ever going to grab my attention that day. Well, that day, what grabbed my attention was this blue book with its, title facing straight out to me. And it said, A Course in Miracles. And I didn't know what the heck that was. I had no idea. I think maybe I had heard of A Course in Miracles, like Marianne Williamson mentioned it, or I saw her on Oprah, or I don't know. I didn't really think too much about it though. But it was like one of those moments just that stood still in time, and time really did stand still. And, I looked at the book and I'm like, man, there is no way I'm going to read this book. I mean, it was like looking at the Bible. The pages were thin and there was a lot of words, and I've never felt like I was a really strong reader in the first place. And so I'm like, there's no way I'm going to ever read this book. So I put it back down, and then I had to pick it back up. And anyway, then I looked at the back to see how much it cost. And it was like $17 or $18.50. And I'm like, what the heck? This is a used bookstore. There's no way I'm going to spend. Like, there was every reason to talk myself out of not bringing, and I tried to talk myself out of it, probably 5 or 6 times. And then I just accepted that there's no way I'm leaving the store without this book. And I didn't know why. And I did. And so when I left Florida that day, I left with A Course in Miracles, my daughter, my dog, and my mattress in this minivan. And I headed out. And I knew that wherever I was going to land, that I was going to figure out what was in that blue book. And that became my mission. And so that was, kind of my spiritual slap in the face. I feel like when I say that, it was, this whirlwind of purification. Everything fell away. Like the husband fell away, the environment fell away. I put that prayer up, and man, I had to hang on tight because it was a wild ride. And, I needed that. I needed that purification because I don't believe that I would have had the motivation to really get serious about the prayer that I had already sent up, because I didn't really know what it meant, and I didn't really know what I was in store for.
Well, yeah. And a lot of times, we've all had the experience that like you have this like still small voice, or you have a little inkling or a little hit of intuition, and you stuff it down. Right. So it's probably somewhere along the way you probably had like something's not right, something's off. And the way the universe works is if we don't respond to those whispers, right, they get louder and louder until it's a slap in the face, and we're at this place of desperation. And it's like you feel that, that experience of like, I feel like I don't have another choice. Like this is, I have to do something different now. There's just no other option.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely needed an intervention. And that's what I think of that moment as, when I sent that prayer up, another thing that had happened was I had probably a week after I had sent that prayer up, I woke up with like a fever. And I had to run. It's so weird to think about now. I had this desperation. I popped out of bed, and all I could do was get to a pen and paper and just start writing. And all of this stuff just started pouring through me. I think I had 5 pages of information that had just poured right through me. And it was clearly something that was channeled. And I was so freaked out that I didn't even read it for, I don't know, it was quite a while before I even read it. And then I showed it to my husband at the time, and he was like, what'd you do? Get that off the internet? Like, I'm like, like he didn't even believe that I had written it because it was so otherworldly, really. And so that was just part of this, prayer response that I had gotten. And, I look at what I had written now, and it's just so beautiful that I can see that Spirit was trying to guide me and really trying to wake me up, because I was so far asleep, deep, deep, deep within this illusion. And, Jessica, you mentioned getting signs and symbols. I could not recognize them. I wasn't hearing anything. I had so many, just to, I don't want to stick on husband number 2 for very long and ever again. But, I absolutely have come to see him as being one of my greatest teachers. So I'm deeply in debt and grateful for that. But before that ever happened, I had all these signs and symbols and red flags and people saying, "No, Mary, don't do this." And I had I was so determined, though. I was just so determined to be right. To I wasn't, able to look at pain. And I've really kind of come to realize that life as we know it as humans is really about pain avoidance. And then we just keep doing that pattern that seems to suit us to avoid our pain over and over again. And I was so stuck in my pattern, I didn't know how to get out. So, like I said, when I sent this prayer up, I really had no idea how life changing it was going to be, because every aspect of my life had to be changed. Like no stone left unturned was kind of the process. And I didn't really have any idea to the depths that it was going to be transformed.
Well, so maybe let's talk about that, like no stone left unturned, because you talk about going from being a victim of the world and then
Yeah.
transition. So maybe we can start with um like what did it look like? Like what does that mean? Walk us through, like, because we know what a victim is, but sometimes I think we don't see like what does it mean if I'm living my life like I'm a victim of my circumstances or I'm a victim of the world. Maybe kind of give us some concrete and then we'll transition into, and then what does it look like to flip the switch?
Yeah. So, I think that I was just really bought into this character. And the character of Mary had a tough childhood. She was raised in an alcoholic home and a home with some mental health issues. And then life just seemed to happen to me. I really was stuck in this narrative that I was this character, I was this label, I was, whatever the world basically told me that I was, or that people in my life told me that I was, or, just a complete limited belief. Um, that's what I was aligned with at that time. So, kind of like I said before, being a victim of the world for me was just always at the whim of however anybody else was interacting with me, or what somebody told me that I could or could not do. I didn't really understand that I had any power at all. um, and so that's the way I kind of think of being a victim of the world, is that I didn't realize that I had power, that I had an ability to make choices. So rather than, manifesting my experience in a way, I was just a victim of whatever was going on or whatever the circumstances seemed to be. And I had no idea that I was doing this to myself, you know, that I was actually bringing this on or attracting this in, because I was so stuck in my own patterns that I didn't know how to do anything different. I truly didn't know how to um, to change, because I didn't have any awareness that I had a power to truly change. Like, even, if I listened to Tony Robbins or different people or whatever, I mean, I understood that, I could change my circumstances or whatever, but then I would still just be stuck in different circumstances. I didn't realize that the change really, that it was me. It was me that needed to have an openness to change who I believed I was and how I related to the world, rather than just having the world attack or impact or bless, or it was just like whatever the world is going to give me, um, and then I'm going to perceive what it gives me is what it is.
Right,
I
because it's
didn't.
like that wherever you go, there you are, right?
Yeah,
We spend a
exactly.
lot of time rearranging people, places, circumstances, and yet, kind of what you're into, that those patterns remain. You're like, well, I've changed the relationships. I physically moved myself. I moved my house. I did this, and
Right.
yet So that's what I think is incredibly interesting about what we're going to talk about with you. You could have just left. You could have just, it sounded kind of like a country song, right? I went from a Jaguar to a minivan and
Oh
moved across
Lord, yeah.
country. And and if you had not done, you referenced mind training, and if you had not done the inner work, I imagine it all would have continued. So I do want to dive into that. But first, I want to just kind of wrap up with the victim thing. Because when I think of victim, I also think if I'm in a victim place, like I have to defend myself.
Oh
And
yeah.
one of my favorite quotes is, "In my defenselessness, my safety lies." And I remember
Yeah.
one of the first times that we had talked and you shared a story, and I don't know if you used these words, but what came into my head was little miss stands with fist. Because you
Yeah.
talked about how, like two little fists in front of your heart, like as sort of like, this is, I'm the guardian of my heart. Um,
Yeah.
and we think that, like we're defending ourselves, but I just want to hear your thoughts on, like, one, what do we think we're defending against? And then two, what are we actually accomplishing when we're in that sort of defensive, like again, or that defensive stance? And again, I think I'm a victim of the world around me, so I must defend myself. Like, what are we defending against? And again, like what is it actually doing for us when we're in that place?
Yeah, I remember that conversation, and it was the first time that that thought really came to me, this idea, that's actually from Dances with Wolves. And when we were talking about that section, in my defenselessness, my safety lies, is that this image that came to my mind was from that movie where, her name, the main character's name, the love interest name, in her Indian language was stands with fists, because for her family had been murdered, and here the tribe is going to take her in, but she was defensive the whole time. She was terrified, she was frightened. And that is, I think, that position that I was in, that the belief system I had grown up in and what I had learned was that people aren't safe, that people cannot be trusted, that I had already given my heart away so many times. I had all of this evidence to show me that it wasn't safe to expose myself or be vulnerable, truly, is what that was. And that is truly my work every day, is to lay those defenses down and know that I am safe, and know that through my authenticity is where my safety lies. Through the truth that resides in me is where God is. And that, not to get too far ahead here in the conversation, but it doesn't serve me to continue to defend against the truth. And I don't defend against the truth because it's not true, right?
Yep.
I defend against the truth because I feel like I'm going to lose myself. And what that self is my identity with the ego, or what the world has told me I am, or that I believe I am, this character in the world. But that's not who we are. That's not who I am. And so I don't need to pretend I'm this character anymore. And that is the beauty of, for me, that's the most beautiful part, really, or the most exciting and interesting part of spiritual awakening, is realizing that we are not that, that we are the I am, that we are the freed self right now in this moment. And it's by defending that I make the character real again. Like the continually returning back to that defensive posture, that need to be something else, or to people please, or to, just play small. That's what keeps me stuck in my same space.
Yeah, because when you're defending, I mean, you're shutting down, you're not letting that flow into the truth. And you talked about pain and pain avoidance, and that, defensiveness is about avoiding, fear of the pain. And what we know is you can't selectively numb feelings, right? Like if I'm trying to defend against the discomfort, I'm trying to defend against the pain, then we also can't let in the good. Like you can't selectively numb. It's an on and off switch. You're either turned off or you're turned on. I'm open to letting it all come in, or none of it is. Yeah. So I want to jump into the shift, the mind training of the work that has to be done to allow in what you're talking about, to allow in the truth. And I love when you talk about the need to question all of our BS. And of course, listeners, by BS, we mean belief system. We have to question all of our belief system. And we bring up, because that brings into awareness, any thoughts that aren't serving us, so that we can sort of look at it and correct it and adjust it. And kind of along this theme of, you mentioned, there's no external solution to a problem that's a thought problem. You can't change, rearrange and change it. You can busy yourself doing it, and you might have some temporary changes, but you were talking about, if you don't do that inner work, it's just, it falls short. So walk us through, when you talk about mind training and opening up to truth, like what does that look like? And you know me, I always like concrete nuggets. So I like actions. I've always told Mary, I need like, what's step 1 through 5? I'm a good student. If you just tell me how I get there, I will get there. And I know I joke about it, because I know it doesn't always, as the spiritual awakenings and the massive change processes don't always happen in a step 1 through 5 process. But walk us through kind of what the mind training is, and if there are any actionable items, please tell us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, we have to become aware that we are asleep. That I think that's the first step, is kind of that surrender moment, that moment where we say, okay, this isn't working anymore, and I need to be shown a different way. And so once there's a willingness established that, maybe I don't know, then the door can be opened. I always say that it's up to us to make the invitation, that we have to actively invite in and make that invitation every day, every moment, no matter what, that it's up to me to, I am empowered, and Lord, do I need help? And so, that is where I have my kind of that money shot moment every day, is to invite in this intelligence that is greater than myself, that can guide me through every moment of the day, because I can so easily fall back asleep. So that's kind of number 1, is just inviting in, whether it's through prayer, meditation, or just help, whatever it is. And then from there can, and once that door is open, then there's a chance for miracles. And what I mean by that is that, there's an opening now. Now I've said that I might not be right, and I might not understand everything. So I'm just going to be willing to lay my judgment aside, and have a willingness and an openness to hear another perspective. And, it's been my experience, once that's been established, Jesus, Holy Spirit, whoever that higher power is that you're relating to, is just chomping at the bit to have its way with our heart. Because on this journey, even though it's been kind of a terrifying ride for me to let go of the character and let go of the ego, there has been no work that's been greater, and that's been more healing. I had no idea that I even needed healing. And then I, come into this trust building, and that's really what happened. And what happens is that there has to be this development of trust with our higher power. And for me, it was a slow process, because when I said I was little stands with fists, I was that way with God too. I mean, I needed to do a whole lot of healing. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, truly, Jessica.
I was just like, trust is like, that's a meaty one.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it sounds like you're starting to go to it, but yeah, because even when you say it, honestly, I was like, that's a little terrifying, like to be in trust, that can be really scary for folks. So like, what were some of the initial things that you were able to do when you were early on, when trust was like a new concept, a new action item for you? Like, what'd that look like?
Yeah. So I can be slow to warm up.
That's a
Because
great
I kind of learned, yeah, I kind of learned that that wasn't necessarily safe. So that was the same way that happened with spirit. And what was really kind of interesting. So okay, so I grew up as a Lutheran, and it was sort of a strict Lutheran system that I grew up in. And so I got a lot of messages like fear God and God can be vengeful, and like I had sinner, that I was a sinner drilled into my mind. So when I was reading the text that I was going from, my path to awakening was through A Course in Miracles. And so when I was reading text and I was getting lines like God needs you as much as you need God, and God only loves, and it was just completely different than the God that I had grown up to understand. Even though the God that the church was trying to tell me was true, I didn't feel was true in my heart. I was calling BS in my mind, because that's not the God that I knew. So what I thought was kind of interesting for me in this spiritual development is that the symbol of Jesus came into my experience, and I've felt the presence of Jesus in my life a couple times, like when I was really desperate. I've kind of felt this presence before, but I wouldn't say I thought a lot about Jesus. I certainly wasn't ever praying to Jesus, and like it was not like that. And then all of a sudden, I had all of these crazy uh, what like in meditation Jesus would come to me, and I had all these experiences all of a sudden with Jesus, which I thought was really kind of crazy. But the truth is that it helped me build this trust, because Jesus was a symbol that I did trust. It was a symbol that I could bring with me from my childhood into the present moment, and have this reliance on. And that was incredibly helpful for me. And that wasn't something that I sought out. It was something that I was given. And I asked that this path be made easy and understandable for me, so the symbols that would come in this development of trust I could understand. Because like you were talking about earlier, Jessica, that having signs and symbols and red flags, I had all those, but I couldn't see them or identify them. Now that the symbol of Jesus is kind of brought into the picture for me, all of a sudden I can see the symbols, I can understand, I have ears to hear and eyes to see, and I am starting to understand the voice that's coming in and helping to guide me through this process. And it was incredibly unnerving. It became really clear to me that I was so tethered and tied into this human character that I had completely forgotten that I'm spirit having a human experience. And, kind of getting those two things to I was all over the board. Like I remember when the Course in Miracle tells us that we're asleep in kind of this illusionary state. And actually the Bible says the same thing too. It alludes to that Adam fell asleep, and it never mentions that he woke back up. And so in this world we're just sort of sleepwalking through, and totally bought into this humanized character, completely forgetting that, we are God's kid, living in the kingdom, sitting at his table all the time. And so, undoing the ego is just a process of discovery. And that's what spirit has to use to build trust with us, is all the things that we're associated with in this worldly experience is now the means to our awakening, which is what happened to me, and which is really cool. And I got to question things like, what does being a daughter mean? What does being a mom mean? What does being a good employee mean? Like all of the things what does being good mean? Like even that, just the idea of like what I thought was good, maybe wasn't even accurate. I thought to be good, it had to look a certain way. And then I started to question all of the things that I had judged to be one way or the other, or black or white, or that I had already made a decision and an ending to. Like everything that I had created in my world, in my mind, already had an ending. That's why I was so disappointed, because the ending that I had already made up never happened. It would end up a different way. And that's kind of goes back to being a victim of the world too, because I had already put a limit onto things and onto relationships and situations. And so this whole world opened up to me that had all of this potential, that I didn't realize was there before. So it was through the development of trust with spirit that I could be shown those things. Without that, I didn't have an openness or a trust or a willingness to see things differently. I didn't know I could see things differently. And then, boom, next thing I know, my mind and my heart are just blown wide open, and nothing looks the same anymore. I say I used to hate surprises because I am such a control freak. Not I don't really, I don't think I necessarily come off as a control freak, because I'm pretty good. I've got that persona, like being that nice girl persona figured out, that, I try not to be too overbearing, but internally I've got so much anxiety that I become this control freak. And, you know, I used to hate surprises because I needed to have everything to be in its box and under control in order for me to feel okay. But now I'm like, because I've developed this trust with spirit, that I just know everything is planned out perfectly. And the best plan is for me to just step back, for Mary and her ego to just step back, step aside, and let spirit do everything, do all the work, take all the responsibility. And I can just sit back and enjoy the ride and enjoy what unfolds. And in that way, I'm never disappointed. It's awesome. It's so cool. It's the coolest thing to live a life that, I used to be disappointed, like I said, all the time. My expectations were never met. And now my expectations are like surpassed. And like there's all this room and all this space for miracles to just fall like rain, because I haven't already made assignments and placed my value on how things should be and go, and that there's just this openness. Life can just flow if I get out of the way. And that's it's miraculous. I can't come up with a better word, I guess, but it's truly miraculous. And that's all happened through the development of trust. So when we're talking about mind training, it's really every day just having this willingness to put my judgments aside and to say, Spirit, you show me the way. I need your help. I need your eyes. I need your ears. I need to have you keep it simple for me, because I will complicate, the smallest thing into the most mind-boggling task. And I know that that's what Mary does. I know that's what she continues to do. So now that I'm onto all my BS, all my belief systems, I have a willingness to do something different, to lay my judgments aside and let spirit lead the way. Then I can be shown. So when I find myself in a situation where I have a judgment come up, or a disappointment, because obviously those things still happen, and that is the exact thing that I need to look at. So ping, my radar's gone up, or my hertz come up, or whatever it is. I know that's a gift for me to look at with spirit. So spirit can reinterpret my judgment, my value, and actually show me what's going on. And I, kind of going back to this little stands with Fist Girl, I had to be able to see that there was a little girl within me that was terrified, which I had no awareness of. And so that was part of the process too, was going back to that place that, I was stuck. I was stuck as that little girl, terrified. And I didn't even know what I was terrified at. I didn't even know that I was. So spirit, helped walk me through everything, every single belief that I had about myself, why I shouldn't even talk about it in the past tense, because this is an ongoing process. Mind training is in every moment. I mean, I fall asleep again like everybody else does, but it's like in every moment we've got the opportunity for a miracle to occur. Every moment I have this opportunity to see somebody as God would see somebody, rather than how I see them. And that is where freedom is. Freedom is where I have let go of all of the crap that no longer serves me or serves anybody else, and let this energy rush in to break the chains and set everybody free.
Yeah, freedom. I'm down with that. So what the question that's coming to mind is, because I know you work with a variety of different people, and so what I'm thinking about is, how does this apply? Like, how can the training apply for somebody who's listening to this and thinking like, yeah, but my like religion or God and spirit, like that feels distant for me. Like that doesn't resonate for me. So from like
Mhm.
sort of a secular, or I'm sure, again, I know you've worked with, in different arrays of life, like you've worked with folks. So I'm sure some of them have been like, what's like the secular version of this? Or how do you approach this with somebody who's like, yeah, I love this idea of freedom and I can get down with surrender and the mind training, that makes sense of being like, okay, how can I think of this again? And maybe it's, I trust my instinct, and because spirit sounds difficult, but yeah. So like, how do you approach it for somebody who kind of the spiritual realm doesn't resonate for them, or it feels scary, or insert whatever distancing issue is in place there? Like, how would you approach this mind training, or what might you offer to a listener that's not quite there?
Yeah, so I would say that, God is synonymous with love, or just with energy, right? And and that is one universal language. And so it doesn't matter if you even believe. I always believe in my heart that people have truth that lives within them, and that for some of us it's more buried than others. And you know God or love, or this divine energy, is just waiting to be made to come alive. That's what's really waiting to happen. And I really, Jessica, I know that you're really looking for kind of a concrete step or answer, or how these words can reach somebody. But I know in my heart that the words that a person needs to hear are reaching them right now in the way that they can hear the words. And again, I just kind of come back to, if somebody's got a openness or a willingness to want to do something different, and they believe that there is an intelligence of some sort greater than themselves, that is the perfect point to just start your journey. Maybe have an intention of, I want to start a spiritual journey. It just might be as simple as that. Or I just want to look at the way that I've been living life to see if there's another way I can live life. I mean, we can put uh, New Age labels on things. We can put Christian labels on things. We can put Catholic labels on things, or satanic labels on things. I don't think any of it matters. I think what I didn't realize is that I was lost, and I was suffering, and that I didn't have to live like that anymore. So I just really wanted to have a different experience. And in that way, the door can be opened. And it's going to come to everybody in a different way. What my curriculum is, what my symbols are not going to be the same as what your curriculum is, or what your symbols are that are going to come into your life to work with you. And I think that it can come in all sorts of ways, because, God is speaking a universal language. So it can come in the ways that you're doing your work. It can come in with animals. It can come in with, church or whatever. But
Relationships. Woo.
relationships, that's a huge, well, that's the real kicker. I mean, the
Learning
whole,
classroom. Yep.
yeah, oh my gosh, it's through relationships that's it's really happening, and connection. So I always think that every connection that I'm having is an opportunity for me to listen and to tune in to what God or spirit or life, it doesn't, we get really stuck. And that was a big problem that I noticed facilitating some of these classes with A Course in Miracles, because as you know, it's written in like Christian terminology, and people will just get up and walk out like they didn't come to hear about Jesus, and they did,
Mhm.
and I think that once you sort of go through the process of undoing, that you start to realize that it's all the same. It doesn't matter if it's Buddhism, if it's A Course in Miracles, if it's a standard Christianity, it's all the same thing. The language may seem different. There might be different dialects, so to speak, but the message is all the same thing. And that's just simply trying to remind us that, we are not of this world, and that we are something bigger and greater than this limited container that we've assigned ourselves to be.
Yeah, that's great. Another thing I want to touch on, because you talk about now living a purposeful life overflowing with awareness, forgiveness, and miracles. And I want to pull out forgiveness, because that word I think can be really tricky for
Yeah.
humans. We have, I think there are a lot of different definitions of forgiveness and what it means and how we practice it. So I'd like to hear like what forgiveness means to you, and give us some forgiveness practices.
Yeah, well, forgiveness, what that means to me, and the short of it is that what my brother has done has not actually occurred. And so it's all a matter of perception. I've spent my whole life believing one thing that's kind of all the same thing. And, when I get right down to the specifics of it, is that I've believed that this other person is the character that I've assigned them, and that they have a particular role, and I've kind of put them in a container or put them in a basket. And I have completely forgotten that they are also a child of God doing the best that they can do. And so I have been in a position in my life where I've held on to a lot of resentments and a lot of hurts, and, um, kind of holding things over people's heads, whether it's as societies or in interpersonal relationships, or whatever. It applied to everything, really. I had condemned and was never able to see it any other way, because I believed I was right in my judgment. And so, for example, let's say I'm married to my first husband, and he's done X, Y, or Z. I had a lot of pain and hurt and resentment towards him, but that pain, hurt, and resentment lived in me, um, and was actually causing residual damage to me and to my psyche. And so the idea of practicing forgiveness for me means is kind of like when Jesus says, "Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do," but not in a pompous way, like, oh, because they're so stupid, they don't know what they're doing, they're just going around hurting people. Not like that, but truly that I can, with compassion, understand that, this person has lost their way, that um, that their intention was to never truly hurt me, but they are where they're at, and they don't have the tools to do anything different. And if they had the tools, that they would use the tools. And it takes being in relationships. This is going to sound maybe a little radical to some people, because it feels personal, right? Like we're in this relationship and it feels very personal. And so if they make a jab or whatever, or just say something, I'll take it as a jab, or they'll rub up against my already sore spot. And so I'm very sensitive to what other people are saying to me, or how I'm interacting with them. And I'm so caught up in the quote unquote personalness of it, that I forget that they are truly just doing the best that they can, that they are um, a spirit that is in a circumstance where they are also under the hypnosis or the anesthetic of this world, and that it's impossible for them to actually hurt me, that's something that I have allowed, and that's a decision I have made, and that it's actually not personal, and that I can forgive them because they've actually done nothing wrong.
Yeah, that what you just said, like that can sound, I think, really scary to somebody, or like offensive, maybe even like, oh, that what I'm experiencing is a decision I have made. Like, whoa! But it makes me think of in the book, "The Body Is Not an Apology." Sonia Renee Taylor, the author, she writes that we have built a world that is a reflection of our belief that we are not enough. So
Yes,
when
yeah,
we think about that, like with relationships, and as we talk about, relationships are these assignments, they show up as an opportunity to learn something. And so if we can think about it in that way, we can think like, okay, if I have this other human in my life and I'm having a hurt experience, but if I remember like, okay, that I love the analogy of the projector screen, right? Like that people and
right,
circumstances in our life, they're like the blank projector screen at the movie theater, and the projector in the back of the room, like that's our mind. And so our mind is projecting onto that blank screen. And so we can get confused in life, right? We go up and we're trying to like, if there was like a little black spot on the screen, we're like going up to the screen and trying to remove it. Like it's out there on the screen. It's the person, it's the human, it's the situation. Let me like wipe off that black spot. But really, that black spot is a speck of dust that's back on the projector. So if I go back to the
right,
projector and I clean off my mind, I clean off the projector lens, that black spot is gone from the screen. And so I think about that quote, like when we're thinking about forgiveness, it's not like absolving somebody for having done something wrong, but this idea that I can just look at it differently. Like if I really look at this situation and what someone or something has done, and just take an opportunity to reflect back on like what's going through my mind, right? Like what am I, do I believe that that there's something wrong with me, and this person is reflecting that back to me, so I feel hurt. And I think, there's always the pull, when we talk about this, people will be like, so, the really heinous things done in the world, children being hurt and wars and people being sexually assaulted, like they did that to themselves. Like, no, 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 no. Like apply this, start with applying this mind training portion, applying it to something interpersonal, that resonates a little bit more. But I think our minds, we have this tendency, we want to go to the extreme to like prove it wrong. But that really resonates with me, this idea that forgiveness can be that opportunity to see like, oh, what's inside myself that I am projecting onto the situation, which could be completely neutral, right? Like my thoughts are what are giving it that meaning. So when it comes to forgiveness, that same thing can apply. But sometimes I feel like when it comes to forgiveness, that can feel like a stretch, right? Like we want to make forgiveness, we want to put the other person has to do something for us to be able to forgive.
right.
And that circles back to what you were talking about in the beginning, where we can give up. That's such a disempowering place to be, right? If we
Absolutely.
give it, somebody else has to do something for me to feel okay. Like saying that out loud, like that sounds a little absurd, right? That like my
Right.
inner landscape is dictated by something or someone out there. Like that doesn't make sense. It should be on the inside. So yeah, forgiveness is an opportunity to see that, which is something we have. And it's an opportunity that happens a lot. So that's an opportunity to exercise that mind training muscle.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really, I'm really saying in every moment, right? Like either I'm a victim or not. Like you brought up a really good point, but I'm also saying that I'm choosing whether the other is innocent or not. I'm constantly in this state of judgment, and being in that state of judgment is a terrible, lonely, desperate, pathetic place to be. There is no
Yep.
freedom in being the judge. When I'm in that place of judgment, I am not only am I superior and I don't have any sense of humbleness, which I think is another big key to mind training, is to be able to have humbleness about us as well. Because without that humbleness, we are the judge, the decider, and the executioner, all in one. And there, in that way, we have already edged God or spirit out. Wayne Dyer used to say the ego is edge God out. That's what his acronym for the ego is. And that's what we do in all of these moments, whether it's a memory that comes up from the past and keeps, reliving itself through us, or whether we're projected out into the future. We're just constantly in this state of judgment and just like you said, Jessica, trying to project the guilt that is living within us out onto the screen, onto somebody else. And we don't have to live like that anymore. We can simply see that I cannot see the innocence within myself if I cannot see it in my brother. Like, there are people I don't agree with that I think are, not going about policy or life or whatever the thing that I think is proper, the way that I'd like to go about doing things. But at the same time, I can see that they're doing the best that they can. And either I'm giving them the power to do right or wrong or create or whatever, or I'm just remembering that God is in charge. Otherwise I'm just making this other person my higher power as well. And that's not helpful in any circumstances.
Yeah. And I like that invitation that you just presented there, is that we don't have to live like that anymore. Like, right. If you're not feeling a sense of inner peace, if you're not feeling true freedom, there is another way. I can choose again. Right.
Amen.
Amazing. So, one final question. This is all great and meaty, good stuff. And so, before we go, I want to ask the question that I ask all of our guests, which is, what does it mean to you to live an unblocked life?
Well, it means everything. So I'll just say that it means everything to me to live an unblocked life. And what I mean by that is that I wasn't living life before. Today I am living life because I'm willing to look at the blocks and barriers to the awareness of love or God's presence in my life. And so to live an unblocked life means that I'm willing to look at all the BS that comes up. When somebody cuts me off in traffic, when my kid talks back to me, when my husband's watching the game instead of, being engaged with what's going on here in the present moment. It's about having a partnership with my higher power, allowing them to lead the way, getting myself out of the way so I can live in joy and freedom. And the means of doing that is to look at all the beliefs that I've had, all the judgments that I've had, all those are all the blocks. And that's what's blocking me from joy and peace and everlasting happiness, are those blocks. So am I willing today to release more that doesn't serve me? Am I willing to let go? When I'm holding on to resentments, pain, fear, I am actually taking the poison, right? I'm saying that somebody else has done something wrong, but I'm the one that has to pay the price for it. And I don't have to live like that anymore. I can choose again. I can choose to take whatever seems to be coming up in this moment and recognize it as a block to my peace and freedom, and use that exact nugget of information to, to be that key and to cut the tether to a world of suffering and fly and not have to have a destination. That's what it is about for me, of living an unblocked life. It's true freedom. And I have true freedom when I am in a state of compassion and true equality with all life.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Thank you for all of the nuggets of wisdom and sharing your experience and knowledge, Mary. I'm so grateful to have you here today. And for all the listeners, until next time, stay open, stay free.